I always saw myself as a lawyer who wanted to make a difference to people's lives, and I think I do make a difference to the lives of every family that I represent. So the answer is that my clients inspire me. I also like to win. I'm a competitive person, and I think that definitely helps in this job. So my name is Madelene Holdsworth, and I'm a solicitor at Slater & Gordon. I've been working with victims of asbestos-related conditions, including mesothelioma, for 17 years. Like many people, I sort of fell into this. I always knew that I wanted to do an area of law which involved working with people and helping people. And I was placed during my 2-year training contract at this firm into the industrial disease department. Now, I knew a little bit about asbestos because my dad and granddad worked in the building trade, but I didn't know about the disease mesothelioma, and the job on day one was to learn how to pronounce and spell the word. I was fortunate enough to be placed into a department with a number of very specialist, experienced asbestos solicitors who still work at Slater & Gordon with me. And I was inspired by them to qualify into the industrial disease department and do this as my career. At Slater & Gordon, we support victims of mesothelioma and their families through what is one of the hardest times in their lives. They've often been recently diagnosed with a devastating condition, often a condition that they have never heard of before, and the exposure to asbestos happened many years prior during their previous working life, and sometimes in circumstances where they can't even remember where they were exposed to asbestos. We can assist victims of mesothelioma and their families with advice and representation in a claim for compensation against their exposer, often the former employer of that person. I think it's difficult to specify what's the most tragic case I've worked on because they're all tragic. In every case, we're dealing with a victim and a family, and as part of the claim, we get to know that family really well. So we visit them at home several times during the course of the claim, and it's impossible for that not to get under your skin. I'm working on a tragic case at the moment whereby the gentleman who has mesothelioma, his brother, 2 uncles and his father all died from the same condition, and they all worked at the same factory in Manchester, and sadly he's now succumbing to the same disease his family members also did. Other tragic cases that we have had are cases involving the person who develops mesothelioma not being the person who worked with the asbestos. So very often a husband will work with asbestos and the wife gets mesothelioma because they've washed the husband's clothes. I had another case whereby the wife went every day to her husband's place of work and took him his sandwiches, and while he ate them in the yard, she stood there and had a chat with him. The guilt that those people feel in that situation is devastating to watch. I always saw myself as a lawyer who wanted to make a difference to people's lives, and I think I do make a difference to the lives of every family that I represent. So the answer is that my clients inspire me. I also like to win. I'm a competitive person, and I think that definitely helps in this job. When you receive a diagnosis of mesothelioma, it's important that you take the time to understand the diagnosis and discuss any treatment options with your treating consultant. If you want to consider a claim for compensation in respect of your development of mesothelioma, then it is important to make contact with a specialist asbestos solicitor as soon as possible to document your recollections. If someone approaches Slater & Gordon about their mesothelioma case, then we will visit you at your home address within a couple of days of being contacted. That home visit usually takes 2 or 3 hours, and the purpose of it is for us to document all of your recollections in relation to where it is you came into contact with asbestos and the exact circumstances of that exposure. We also take a full working history from you so that we have the full picture. Further to the home visit, there's a number of records which need to be gathered by your solicitor. So they get in medical records, pension records, records from the HMRC. We also have to carry out a large amount of legal research into tracing the people or companies who exposed you to asbestos, and importantly, working out whether or not they had employer's liability insurance. So mesothelioma claims can proceed if there's no employer's liability insurance, because there is a special scheme for where insurance isn't traced, but those searches have to be done in order to get to that point, so that your solicitor can advise you on whether the claim should go through the regular civil claims process or through the mesothelioma scheme. We face various challenges when making claims for compensation on behalf of people with mesothelioma. One of the challenges is establishing where it is that the exposure to asbestos occurred. And sometimes people come to us and they can't remember. And it's a matter of trying to establish where the exposure must have occurred with reference to that person's work history. Another challenge we face in mesothelioma claims is tracing the defendants, so usually the former employer, if they have long since stopped trading. And there are various searches that we can do online. Sometimes we find ourselves in archive libraries in various locations across the country, trying to pinpoint the identity of the correct defendant so that we have someone to pursue in the case. But that shouldn't be a barrier to you seeking specialist legal advice, because as long as we find the employer's liability insurers of that former company, and we have ways and means that we can trace insurers, then we can make a claim. And in the alternative, there is the mesothelioma scheme for where no insurance can be traced. At Slater & Gordon, we get involved in a large number of fundraising events to support charities who help victims of mesothelioma and other asbestos-related conditions. So we have our annual walk up Snowdon that we do as a team at Slater & Gordon, and this year I attempted the Three Peaks Challenge. The fundraising that we do is so important to raise much needed awareness of the dangers of asbestos, and also to raise funds which will go towards research into treatments for mesothelioma.